All right, this is Donnan and Dayne from UGASports.com. I'm Dayne Young, and that's Jim Donnan on the other end. Coach, how are things in your world?
Well, I'm doing okay, Dane. Glad to be with you. It's a good little respite here to have a chance to talk a little ball and relate to our fans. But there's a lot of things going on in today's society, and I'm certainly not an expert on any of those. But hopefully, we can shed a little light on football here for all the fans.
And I think fans are definitely clamoring for anything football related at this point. And I think we are seeing some signs of hope that the season may go on as normal. A lot of those decisions will not be made. But I kind of just wanted to throw out, we're hearing a lot about the date of July 1st, that may be when players can rejoin, come back to campus, I guess, to begin practice. Just hypothetically, let's use that date, July 1st. What then will the summer and fall look like in terms of goals that the coaches want the players to accomplish?
Well, that's certainly a good, far-reaching question that I could take a lot of different ways. But one of the things I think is important here is as we get our players back, is the NCAA said yesterday that the players can come back to campus without having to be in summer school. So, as much as I want them to go to school and everything, they built that rule in a couple years ago where everybody could go to summer school, including the incoming freshmen that hadn't been here the for the spring to kind of acclimate themselves to college. But now with this kind of scenario, I think that was good by the NCAA, where these kids can really spend the brunt of their time just like they would in fall camp, trying to get ready to acclimate themselves for the football grind. And one of the things that has concerned me throughout this process as a former coach is the physical conditioning that these kids have been under for so long and so much structure, and now all of a sudden they haven't had anybody monitor them, face to face. Certainly they're doing it online and all that, but so many of them don't have the equipment to do that. So I think the fact that we could have 4 to 5 weeks of acclimatization, however how you say that word, getting used to the sun, getting used to getting back in shape, football shape, lifting weights, maybe trying to get some tone to their muscles that they lost. But just because football is such a heavy contact sport, Dane, the prevention of injury is really one of the real things that all of these strength and conditioning teams work on, is to try to make sure these kids can sustain themselves throughout the year without getting injured. And we've lost a lot of ground, just like everybody has, whatever level. We've lost that ground, and we've got to try to recoup some of that. So I think the month of July would be almost entirely spent physically on retooling your skill set as far as strength, conditioning, getting used to the heat, trying to get your diet back under control if you've got weight problem because nobody's been monitored, trying to build up some mass for these guys that lost it. And, having some meetings and maybe some 7-on-7 on their own. And, just really trying to do like you would do after spring practice, as far as between spring practice and fall camp, trying to get your team ready. And then once you got that accomplished, hopefully, then you could map out your plans for fall camp. But with that, is there going to be a really strong deal about the sanitation, about testing, about everything involved to make sure that we're not talking about 11 football players or 22. We're talking about a big unit of people on your campus that are going to be together, and they're going to have to be going by these guidelines. 50 or more, I think, is in the third phase of what the president's guidelines are. So the football team has around 115, 120 out there. 105 for the first 3 weeks, and then once the camp breaks and school starts, it's 120. So I think,
and then when you're adding coaches and GAs and support staff that need to be around for
yeah,
the practice to happen, that number rises even more.
yeah, and trainers and equipment managers, strength and conditioning, the doctors, medical staff. you're talking way over 200 people out there. So I think what we would have to see is maybe a little bit geared down fall camp as far as the start of it, as far as intensity is going to be there. But as far as what the players can endure, you're just going to have to work it out uh, physically and emotionally and everything. And Kirby will have to get a feel for his team if he's working them too hard or not hard enough. But they've got these monitors that they put on them that keep up with their how they can react and all. But I think you're going to try to have all these contingency plans about how much contact you're going to have, how much, just everything, extra conditioning, whatever it might be. So this is a new world for all of us as far as what will be accomplished. But as far as getting ready, I would say the main thing is get your team ready physically with the July workouts and a little bit into August. And then from that point on, I don't know if the NCAA is going to say the teams that because you didn't have spring practice, they might, instead of saying having 29 practices, they might say you maybe can start a little earlier and have, 35 or something like that. Who knows? That's just a what if, but it would be great for us because we could use some extra work, particularly on offense, installing a new offense. But I will say, in talking to so many coaches that I get a chance to talk to around the country, because some of them ask me what I think, some of them really could care less, but most of them have been really pleased with their ability to relate to the players daily. First of all, academically, because of what needed to be done as far as maintaining their grades, and then secondly, their conditioning, their nutrition, their mental hygiene, and then having a chance to meet with them and install the different offense, defense, and special team plans has been really good, and it's been some really good teaching. And what happens when you don't have that time clock bearing down on you, hey, we got to finish up in 5 minutes, we got to be on the field and all that, because you just don't finish a meeting and practice and go right on the field. I mean, the kids got to put their pads on, they got to get out there, they got to walk about 5 or 6 minute walk usually to get out from where they are. And by the time you get ready for practice, the meetings are not quite as long as some of these Zoom meetings. So I think they've really taken advantage of that, and the coaches have had a chance to reflect and do some really good evaluation and self-scouting and things like that of their own team, like they always do, but maybe a little more because there's so much more time during the course of a day. So I would say there's going to be a geared down first week of practice to see how they react, and then amp it up and then get going. So, but knowing our team and our mentality, our kids have been working hard and doing what they can within the framework of what the rules are as far as around their own place. And, whether they can find a gym or anything to work out, it's hard to know. But I do know some of the local players and some of the kids that have apartments here that didn't leave and go home have tried to do as much as they can working out and, maybe working out some together. So we'll see how that works out.
Coach, I've known you for about a year and a half or 2 years now. And one thing I know is that if you were the head coach and you had spent the last 8 weeks communicating with Zoom meetings and staring at your computer that whole time, you would be so antsy right now just to get out on the football field.
Hey, you got that right. I'm sure most everybody is. I don't think any coaches have ever been accused of having a lot of patience. I think that's one of the things you got to understand that to be a good football team, player, program, you got to have a sense of urgency about you, because you got to understand Florida, Tennessee, Alabama, all these other teams are undergoing the same thing that we are. And what they're having to do is how they're using their time. And I've always said, don't confuse activity with accomplishment. Just because you think you're having all these meetings and doing all this stuff, what are you getting accomplished? What are these kids learning? And I think the fact that Kirby and the staff test these guys a lot about what they've, instead of, they can't talk to them much except over the phone, but they actually give them some tests on what they've been using to distribute to them. So, but realistically, the whole society, whether it's the pro teams or college teams or high school, this is a new norm here. And I talked to a couple of analysts too that aren't full-time coaches now, but have been that and had to redirect their skill set because they were, weren't a full-time coach. And they said it's been amazing how much work they've been able to do, studying other teams' opponents, getting ready for the next year. And the reason is these film guys, these video guys are just unbelievable how they can, put that video straight into their computer from the over at Butts-Mehre or wherever it might be, where Alabama, where it might be, and it's just like they're in their office. It's that the only thing they're not doing is they're not interacting with the coaches, but they're really getting a lot done, and have enjoyed a little bit of a lot of the time they've had a chance to spend with their families. But certainly that part is definitely going forward. Our guys are working on Virginia. They're working on self-scout. They're doing all that. So that part's been right there. The number one thing that I feel like that we've been able that's been a definite down thing is I've always told everybody that seeing a kid in person or watching him on the eyeball test is the number one thing for me in recruiting after you figure out that he's the kind of guy you want to recruit by watching his tape and looking at his transcript. But missing the May recruiting cycle and not going out and being able to watch these guys practice, watch these guys. I'm not talking about just the 2021 guys. I'm talking about the 22 and 23 guys, and the fact that none of them are coming to camp. I'm going to tell you right now, of all the things that we do here, and there's a lot of them that are primo, but our camp situation, if anybody that listens to this could come over there and spend a day watching the way we work these kids out and test them and see how they compare, and have Kirby Smart talk to them, do all the things that you got to do on a one-day deal. I guarantee if it's not the best, it's in the top two of anything I've ever seen as far as organization. And where it comes to fruition is you see some of these kids that commit to other schools and you wonder why Georgia's not recruiting them and things like that. I can tell you why. They've had their ass on campus here, and Georgia didn't think they were good enough, and that's why they didn't recruit them. So now we miss some really good kids that are here that sign with other people, but you see our name right up there with them that Georgia was recruiting them. But there's some guys that have signed with some schools, and I won't mention who that school is, but
they're up north. I think everyone kind of knows they're up north.
But they're doing a good job. I mean, a lot better than they did. But some of those kids, were here and we didn't. Now, that doesn't mean that they're not going to be good players, but we just have such a high echelon of who we pick, and it's going to be difficult without this camp to miss on a couple guys that maybe if they would have come to camp, we would have gone on and recruited. Like I know of several that have come to our camp that nobody really ever heard of, and Georgia ends up signing them. They turned out to be great players because they saw what they could do and how they compete.
I think that's a good point you made, though, that most of the recruiting fallout from this spring of being away from campus, you're not going to see it in the 2021 class, but because coaches already really had a good idea of who those players were, who their targets were going to be, and the order in which they were going to pursue them. And yeah, that can change a little bit based on some things, but we're seeing Brock Vandergriff really make a plea for Amarius Mims to come be his left tackle. So we're seeing the current 2021 recruits really kind of come together, or at least attempt to, toward the end of what the cycle will be. But what you're going to see is that 2022, 2023, there's going to be a little catch-up to be played, right?
Right, from that standpoint, evaluation. But the one thing that we do well is we get those young kids in for games, and we would have invited them to spring practice and to the spring game, so that we didn't have a chance for that. But we're definitely up on the fact that a lot of these guys that have already committed, one of the things you see about them, hey, I've been to Georgia a lot, which they've gone through the cycle. They were recruited as a sophomore. They came to games. They came to camp. They came to official visit here. Some of them already had their official visits, whereas, we're missing out on a lot of those guys that we could have had official visits now this spring. So, but everybody has the same problem, and you just got to find a way to do something different, I never will forget just one little story here. I was on a plane one time with a guy, and I was flying to North Carolina to recruit Tim Worley for Oklahoma. And this guy was a GE exec, and we were talking, and he said his job was he had retired, and now he was kind of a consultant, and his job was to go into different companies or doctors' offices or anything like that and have a plan on how to market themselves. Like he was just left Kansas City. I was flying from Kansas City to Charlotte. And he said he'd been there talking to a hand doctor who was a terrific doctor, but he had no bedside manner. So he talked to him about, hey, look, well, we're just going to set up, at that time, we just set up a little film. This was 1985. And we're going to get all the people in your office to tell about how they come in, what you do, how you analyze them, all that. And then the last thing they'll do is just meet you for a second. They really don't talk to you about all the stuff that's got to go through. But, his work was great, but he wasn't real good at face-to-face. So he's asking me what I was doing. I said, I'm the offensive coordinator at Oklahoma. I'm going to try to recruit this running back out there in Lumberton, North Carolina. And he said, well, what are you going to do different than anybody else? And I said, well, I really hadn't thought of it. I felt like Oklahoma had a good shot. I said, it's down to us and Clemson, and everybody knows he ended up going to Georgia, but we had him, and then I talked the kid after he wouldn't go here to going to Georgia. Everybody's heard that story, so I won't talk about it. But anyhow, he said, you got to do something different, because everybody comes in, meets him in the coach's office, does his stuff. So, hey, when I got there, I had a pretty good plan. So instead of when I got there, I said, Ruffin McNeil, who's now was a head coach at East Carolina and defensive coordinator at Texas Tech and worked it out. He was assistant coach. And I said, hey, Ruffin, I need to take this guy somewhere else and get him away from here. So we went out there in the parking lot, and he was a bus driver too. This kid drove a bus. And I said, well, show me your bus here. Let's go over it and show me what all you do. And we talked about that. And then when Switzer came for his visit with him, he actually rode the bus with him and went around and talked to all the kids. It was great. All those kids thought it was awesome. But just doing something a little bit different, caught that kid's attention just from a little bit. That wasn't why he wanted to come here. He liked our offense and all that. But the idea is you got to have a good plan here. Is a little different. All these coaches are talking to him on Zoom and talking to him on FaceTime and all that stuff. But I know that Kirby is really good at one-on-one, and having him in his office is one thing, but just talking to him on this is, try to be genuine. But hopefully we can keep on the great class we're having. I really think, based on the guys that I know and what I hear from the coaches and all, we're in really good shape with a lot of good players. And, everybody said, hey, we're going to shock the world and all that. I mean, I think there's going to be an electric bolt around the world when we sign all these guys.
I don't know how shocking it'll be just based on trends, but I mean, it'll be impressive nonetheless. A lot of times the shocking factor happens when a team has not done it before, and maybe it goes to new heights from what it's already been, but it's just been spectacular.
I mean, early on you had to make a sales pitch to say, hey, believe in us and all that. Now it's the real deal. I mean, it's no question that, hey, he can bring you in, develop you, help you get your degree, get you ready for the league, whatever it might be. But our own players are our best. They do a great job. Our kids from South Florida, they're sold on what's going on up here. And any kid we bring in, they just can't wait to be around them, and they tell them how it's like. what it's like around there and in the football office and everything. So, and the same way is true and that's why we've been able to recruit so many out of state players. I mean, you get a good kid in here like Swift and Webb, and then all of a sudden they're talking. Webb's parents and Swift's parents are talking to Judy's parents, the kid we just got. I mean, you can't beat that.
Yeah, and it happens quick. That pipeline just goes all throughout the country. Coach, one of the things I really like doing on this podcast is kind of learning football from you, just because your mind and your experience, it goes so many different ways than what I understand football to be, and I think our fans would say the same thing. One of the things that we've heard from the SEC championship game last season, and it wasn't just in that game, but in terms of Georgia, it was LSU would not allow a defense to substitute, and so they made it really difficult to kind of match up with them one-on-one or match up with them in different ways, and that's one of the reasons that LSU had so much success. And we saw Auburn try to combat it, we saw Georgia try to combat it, we saw Clemson try to combat it, and then even Alabama as well. Teams are going to do that more and more because it had success last year. So if you're coaching a defense and you're going to say, hey, the offense is not going to let you substitute, what is the reaction now that a defense must have to make to be successful against an offense that doesn't allow substitutions?
Well, to set that up, what you're saying is exactly right. But what they're able to do is by not substituting, they have a guy that is like Edwards Hilaire or however how you pronounce his name, who could line up in the backfield. But just like Robert Edwards, he can shift out into the slot, or he can shift out to the tight end side on the weak side on the end of the boundary and become a flanker and give you the same kind of personnel look that you would if you had three wide receivers in the game. Or, you know, in this case, it would be four wide receivers because their base offense is three wide receivers, a tight end, and a running back. So what happens is to if they've just got the regular personnel, which for them is three wides and one back, then you're more than likely going to have your nickel defense in there. And then if they shift him out, it's hard to get to your dime if they do it quickly, you know, by putting another defensive back in. Like for us, that was, I think Campbell would come in as our sixth guy. So what you got to do is you either got to figure out we got to do better against their three wides and one back set with six defensive backs, or we got to do better against their no backs and five wides with five defensive backs. So where do you go? What do you do? So in the first half, we really basically played with six defensive backs most of the time and didn't worry too much about the run. And they made some spectacular plays, excuse me, but they ended up, you know, we held them down fairly well. We just couldn't do anything offensively. But so I think, you know, the thing that people have had to be able to do if you want to substitute, what we've developed, and I don't know what the word for is, it turbo or speedo or what, if we think that we can get a guy in there quick enough, even if they don't sub like we're talking about, we're ready. You know, Coach Lanning will say, tell everybody on the sideline, turbo, we're getting ready to sub right here. And we'll run a guy in and run a guy, particularly if it's on our hash mark, and we'll run a guy in and run him off regardless if they're subbing or not. So we used to couldn't do that, but Kirby practices that, relentlessly, the way they practice. I mean, to the point where they'll make a team run a play like in 11 seconds, and they'll still try to be able to do it. Now, we don't try to do it much, but if we can do it enough where we can get the right call with that, then it really helps you. Particularly, like I said, if we're expecting five wide and they come out in three wide, then, you know, we can still sub sometimes. So the difference in now and say 5 or 6 years ago, when, you know, all this hurry up stuff really came to fruition, maybe even before that, is defenses used to, like in the old days, you had a pro formation and you had a slot formation. So you'd say 5 or 3, just for instance, for your secondary, you play cover 5 or cover 2 now is what they call it, 2 deep, 5 short. If it's a pro, and 3 deep if it's a slot, and you had it covered. But now these teams got all these unbelievable formations. There's no way you can make a double call. You got to make a call and stay with it and have the checks to go with it. If they do this, we do that. If they do this, we do that. And that's where the mental part comes into it. And if you can eliminate the bust, then you can check a lot. If you can't check, then you don't need to be doing it much. You just got to go with what you think's the most, so-called buffet call, something that takes care of everything. And if you can do that, sometimes that works too. But it all gets down to execution and players. And but for instance, for us on the play that everybody remembers when Joe Burrow took the snap and then almost got sacked by Walker, and then he chased him over to the sideline and he threw it down the field with an unbelievable completion. That was a situation where we were able to put in not only the 6 defensive backs, but we put in some designated pass rushers. Mm-hmm. So we might call it, some kind of fast word for guys. And we saw Walker really put the game away against Auburn with a sack there by having, instead of just our regular line in there with 6 defensive backs, we also put an extra guy in there to rush the passer, or maybe 2. And sometimes we'll put an extra guy in just to spy the quarterback. So we could play 6 defensive backs, 3 linemen, then a spy on the quarterback, and then one other guy playing either on the strong or weak side to rush the passer. So there's a lot to be involved in that, and I hope I explained it.
No, I think you did. And one of the things that I've seen just in terms of roster management is finding defenders that can do multiple things, whether it be one of the plays I think of from that game is, like you said, Clyde Edwards-Helaire split off and ran and lined up outside as a wide receiver. He's right up against the sideline, and it's Nakobe Dean in front of him. Now, you don't often see an inside linebacker have to go line up as if he's a cornerback, but that's what he had to do on that play. That's like special versatility that not every athlete has within them. So have you seen Kirby Smart really develop that so his defenders can do more things?
Well, you got to if you've got your regular defense in, and that's what happened. We weren't expecting them, and that's their tendency to, at that point, we knew they did that, but at that point we didn't have 6 defensive backs in. So we had to have 3 over there with those wide receivers to the field and with 2 safeties behind it. And so our nickel guy was on the slot. So when he shifted out, one of our linebackers had to go out there. Now, it probably wasn't some kind of man call. It's mostly something to, one of the things he did real well was run a hitch. So we probably had some kind of jam with Nakobe. But the guys that can do that help you play. Help you if you're good enough to play your base defense against all that. You certainly do a lot of things that you can run from your base defense, your blitzes, your zone blitzes, your twist, everything. As compared to your dime stuff, you might not have quite as many things that you can do, but you get better at it. And I look for us to do that this next year. One of the things I talked about between our first year and our second year, the way that we improved so much was the fact that we were able to not only do a lot more, but we were able to disguise it, and that's how our defense improved so much.
Yeah, I saw that in some of the film review that I've done, and that's one of the most impressive things I saw about Lewis Seen was how he could quickly start, whether it be a blitz or whether he's backing up or whatever he's doing. He has such quickness to be able to go from not moving to full speed relatively quickly. I mean, way faster than, I could do, obviously. But, you're starting to see these athletes that are so smart in what they're doing, and it goes back to the training that they're getting. And I'm not saying that as a PR piece for the Georgia defense, but I'll tell you, Coach, every person I talk to just says this defense, watch out. Just watch out.
Well, it's going to be, you got a lot of, besides the fact you got a lot of returning guys that have played and been outstanding. You got some people coming in that are just going to be have a chance to help us immediately, like Carter up front and Ringo in the back end and Sherman as a linebacker. I don't want to leave anybody out, but those guys can all walk in any place in America and have a chance to help the football team. But the thing about disguise is this, and this is one of the things that, everybody talks about quarterbacks reading defenses and all that, and that's certainly something that Jake Fromm could do as good as anybody. But if you show them something that, like when we were playing against Peyton Manning when I was here, if you show them something and don't do anything but that, they're going to eat you alive. So you got to look at different ways to disguise things where they just pre-snap read. They just can't go back there and be everything's hunky-dory. Well, they got a strong safety in the flat and a corner deep. I got the out all day. Or they got a rolled-up corner with a linebacker lined up on their tight end. I can hit the tight end down the seam. But you watch our defense now, we do these things where we call mug, where the linebackers line up in the line like they're coming, and then they back out at the last second, or our jack and our star guys come off the edge, and then all of a sudden they fake like they're coming and draw a quick pass, and then they're right in the line of vision. And disguise is a big part of our defense, and we do a tremendous job with it.
Well, you have to always be prepared for what an offense might do, and then to try to confuse them a bit too.
One more point I want to make about that Kirby brought out and something I heard him make a speech on is, if we reflect back on the Tennessee game when our corner came off the edge and caused the sack, and then subsequently the guy picked it up and ran. I think it was
Eric Stokes hit Brian Maurer, and Tay Crowder picked up the ball.
And Crowder picked it up and took it for a touchdown. Well, that was a good case of coaching by Coach Lanning on the sideline. He recognized the formation that they were getting ready to do down and distance the way they're breaking the huddle, and he checked to that corner blitz, knowing some of the tendencies that Coach Chaney had, and knowing that they didn't have anybody to pick him up. Usually, when the corner blitz like that, an extra guy will come over, or the guy will just throw hot, what we call a side adjust. A side adjust is by the corner, the wide receiver on the corner. If the corner comes, then the safety's got to come over the top to cover him. So he'll adjust right off the bat and get his eyes with the quarterback and run a slant or a stop or a fade based on where the safety, if he can get there. But we disguised it to the last minute. The corner didn't see it. The guy on the corner, the wide receiver, didn't see it. The running back didn't see it, and most of all, the quarterback didn't see it. But really good. It was really good call by Lanning and really good execution by us, because it looked like we're playing regular defense, and then he comes off the corner.
Yeah, you saw that speed from Stokes, that track speed coming in play there, and Tay Crowder was definitely glad that it happened too.
We're going to have one of the fastest defensive secondaries I've ever seen this year with Campbell and Stokes and the other guy that got hurt his toe last year. I'm having a hard time.
Tyson Campbell's the one that hurt his toe, right?
Yeah, Tyson Campbell.
You got DJ Daniel.
And then who was the guy that came in from Florida, the nickel guy?
Tyreek Stevenson.
Yeah, Stevenson. I'll go back to what I was saying before. Stevenson was actually our dime guy, and Campbell didn't play much dime. But and then the star guy is Wilson, and Webb and Wilson. Yeah.
There's a lot of options. I mean, like I said, Keely Ringo's coming into the mix now, too, among some others that are in there. And people forget Tyreek McGee was in that mix at the beginning of last season, and he still played a special role.
I tell you what, Yeoman game for us against Notre Dame, I mean, we'd have been in bad shape. I mean, they didn't even recognize the fact that we had a corner out there that hadn't played that much because Campbell got hurt. And McGee did a good job on Claypool, and then at the end of the game, they started to work on him a little bit, but that's why they threw it to the tight end so much in the first half, because we were playing so much rolled up coverage. It was trying to protect our corners, and he hit that commit kid a lot. But it's all back and forth all the time, that's for sure.
Well, Coach,
and I apologize for saying that Campbell was nickel guy. Dime guy. I knew it was Stevenson, but they're both from the same hometown, so give me credit for that.
They can have a foot race to see who gets the spot. I think they would enjoy that. Coach, I want to wrap this up with one thing I wanted to ask you. I know you haven't, in your coaching career, had to go through anything unexpected like is going on this year. It's just unprecedented in any of our lives. But I'm sure at times there's had to be things that happened that you weren't necessarily expecting, or something just didn't go the way you planned that it would. Do you have any stories of just how you reacted to things that way?
Yeah, I'm just going to give you a couple real quick here. We had when I was first in Marshall, we were building a new stadium, so we didn't have a dressing room at the end of it, and so we had just kind of this little these tents down at the end, and had the porta potties in there and all. But really, between the two teams at halftime, there was just this little drapery type thing, So they've been killing us in the first half for certain things, but we've been beating them. We're playing Northern Iowa, and actually did a good job against them. But anyhow, they've been mixing up their blitzes and stuff, but we had them under control. But we were getting ready to go back out. You know how the coach calls them back up there with about 5 minutes to go. And I said, okay, anybody got any question? And we had this one old country boy who ended up being an All-American for us, and then was a coach at Charlotte with Coach Lambert, and unfortunately passed away a couple of years ago. Just really sad. But he was an old boy from Kentucky, and he said, Coach, I got something to tell you. He said, they're going to bring a guy through the B gap and twist that linebacker right in behind him. I said, Phil, what are you talking about? He said, I'm telling you, that's what they're going to do. And I said, Phil, you can't make this stuff up. That's so unbelievable. Why would they bring a guy in the B gap and then bring somebody right behind him? I said, that's so unbelievable. Why would they bring two guys in the same gap? I'm telling you, Coach, that's what they're going to do. I said, well, how do you know that? He said, Coach, I was in the porta potty and I heard it. It was so good. I mean,
right time, right place, right?
Hey, we covered it right there, so we drew it up on the blackboard, and we said, "Hey, guard's going to slide down, and in the back, come on over and pick him up." And the first time they did it, we acted like there's nothing to it. And then another time, we were riding over to, and I think some of the fans had heard me tell a story. But my first road trip at Marshall, we were going to VMI to play, and our athletic director wouldn't let us spend the night there because we just didn't have the money, which I understood. But so we left early that morning and stopped in Beckley and had a pregame meal, and then we were driving on over. But we were prepared if something happened. We had these walkie-talkies in our buses, and so I got about 60 miles out of Lexington, Virginia. This second bus, the defensive bus, called up and said, "Hey, our bus is broken down. We're out here on the interstate," and we were about 2 miles ahead of them. So we turned around. I'm trying to think about what to do. So I said, "Okay, all the first team guys get in the offense and defense, and any kickers get on the first bus, and then the first, we'll take a couple replacements in the O line, a couple receivers, but I guess it's about a 40-seat bus thing there, and just take a couple coaches and me, and I told Mickey Matthews, who our defensive coordinator, I said, "Hey, Mickey," I said, "we got no shot. There's no go get this bus over here. So we got our players here where they're in their sweats. The fans will recognize them. I want you to get out and make sure they thumb and somebody pick them up." Because we knew some Marshall people were coming. So I was hoping they would anyhow. So we get to the stadium as we're getting ready to go out to warm-ups, and I see Coach Matthews. I said, "Well, I guess everybody made it." And he said, "Yeah." So we started checking around, and we looked over there in the dressing room, and there was, the managers bring all their equipment and had the shoulder pads and helmets up. There's 4 guys missing. And I said, "I thought you said they all got it right." He said, "Coach, I saw them get in this van with these guys. I know they did." And so we went out there, and I swear to you, you can't make this up. These 4 football players from Marshall were out there tailgating with that guy that picked them up. It was unbelievable. I said, "Get your ass in here and let's get going here." So,
Well, hey, they never get to tailgate, so why not take the
yeah,
opportunity?
and one other real quick one about the buses. We had the same thing. We're going to Appalachian. The first game of the year, it was hot as heck in West Virginia and a little cooler in the mountains. But we're going through the mountains of North Carolina, and the bus breaks down again. But this time it's just the air conditioner on the defensive bus, and it just so happened the defensive bus again. We had this big, humongous defensive lineman named Johnny McKee, who's a big old boy. I mean, just 310. And so I get on the bus and I tell these guys, I said, "Look, all the first team guys and all the other players, y'all get on the first bus, and the rest of us are going to get on the second bus, and we'll just have to make it in there without it, you know." And you can't roll the windows down or anything. So I was looking, and I thought everybody's off the bus, and one of the guys said, "Coach, you better go back there and get Johnny." And so I go back to the back, and Johnny's in the back, 310 pounds, laying there. He'd taken off his pants, he'd taken off his shirt, he'd taken off everything but his underpants, and he was laying there sweating like unbelievable. He said, "Coach, I don't know if I can make it to the front." I mean, he looked like you can just imagine this big old kid laying back there in the back of the bus, sprawled out in his underwear. And I said, "Man, I used to coach at Oklahoma, and now I'm coaching here. We're getting ready to go play a road game." Boy, it was funny.
Yeah, that'd be the first bus IV if he had to have it, I guess.
Yeah, well, I hope the fans liked it. It's a funny story, but I mean, it was good though.
Yeah, those are great stories. And Coach, I always enjoy doing this with you, and we'll do it again next week. So we'll try to get some stories from you, and then I love these football segments where you kind
Yeah,
of
if
educate us all.
anybody's got any football parts they want to ask, make sure to ask you, and you let me know. I hope we're able to get things explained. And I just want to tell everybody that has anything to do with health and well-being of so many people around here. I've just been amazed at the way our physicians and medical people have taken care of people that I know around here in the whole Athens, Clark County, Oconee County area. We've been very fortunate, and hope we can keep our health and safety going like we have the last few weeks.
Can't end it better than that. Thank you, Coach.
All right, thank you.